Have you heard about the Gap assault teams and the critical role they played in the early hours of the Normandy invasion? If you've ever watched Saving Private Ryan, then you'll recall this scene of a Navy Beach Battalion member interacting with Captain Miller on the beach. Have a listen.
Navy Beach Battalion, sir! I gotta clear these obstacles! Make holes for the tanks! All the armor is foundering in this channel! Order, sir!
The armor actually wasn't at the bottom of the channel. They had landed as a critical component of the Gap assault teams. Their job was to land with the first assault troops and clear safe lanes for follow-on waves through the obstacle belts and minefields. Each team consisted of a Navy element, an Army element, and 3 tanks to provide support. If you've ever seen those pictures of tanks on Omaha Beach with the big numbers on the waiting stacks, they belong to a Gap assault team. Alright, just doing a live voiceover, no script. Just gonna react to the footage. So here we got my Belgian gate. This was the very first thing I made with my 3D printer. I was taking an Uber home one night and the driver mentioned he had one and just bought it off of him the next day. It's a Saturn LEU2 and I got the Belgian gate file just after doing a quick Google search. There was maybe like 3 results that came up and this one was the most detailed. It's pretty fragile. If I were to print it again, I'd probably size it up a little bit. And that way it wouldn't be like brittle and it wouldn't break. And there was also some deformities due to how thin the metal was. Here I'm putting some DAS clay onto the base. This stuff is pretty good, especially when you're doing something like a beach. You want to use something that has like a smooth surface. Anytime you see sand right at the edge of the water line, it's going to be really smooth, and then it gets more textured as it gets more dried out further away from the shore. This right here is just a combination of Tamiya putty and extra thin cement, and what that does is it covers up some of those print lines on the Belgian gate and gives the Belgian gate more of a steel texture. This is Tamiya 2-part putty, and this stuff is great for sculpting figures, but right here I'm using it to make what are called Hackiston packs. World War Wisdom put together a really cool video, and I wasn't actually aware of these until he did those, and I thought it'd be cool to include those in these dioramas. So if he ever sees this, that'd be pretty cool. Doing some initial painting on the base, but you're gonna see in just a minute that I wasn't too happy with it. You can see it's really smooth and flat and kind of boring to look at. So I'm putting some more putty, or clay rather, onto the base, and we're gonna do some sand ripples and add some shingle rock just to make it look a little bit more interesting. So here you can see I'm smoothing it out using this picture as a reference. That one's from Normandy Beach, so it's always good to get reference photos from the spots you're trying to depict. Adding some footprints, and then here we got some shingle rocks. This is just gravel. Found it by the river trail, but it happened to be in the right scale. And again, looking at my reference pictures, these ones are ones I actually took, and you'll see there's a lot of different shingle rock, especially in the easy red sector, and that's kind of what I'm depicting here. That's where Robert Capa took a lot of his photos, more or less in that area, and it's not too far away from Lambert's Rock. Here you can actually see I have Primacord wrapped around the charges, and all I did was I took a pair of headphones that was broken and old, took it apart, and they're full of all sorts of little copper wires, and they're really easy to pose and tie around different things. Adding some paint to the base. I'm after kind of a orangish, goldish color, and you'll see at the corner closest to the water, it's blue, and that's because when you pour resin on top of it, that color is going to shine through, and it's going to do a lot more work than tinting the paint. This right here is my favorite reference picture. Probably a little too colorful and saturated compared to the weather conditions on insects, but it really highlights how colorful some of those rocks can be. And in these pictures, you can see they're not quite as saturated as that picture, but they pop. They add some interest to the groundwork. I'm still not too happy with the color of the sand, so I'm going over it some more. I'm actually going to end up darkening pretty much every single area except for the area around the figures, and that's going to give me some blue-orange contrast. And you can really see the orange contrast in these photos. These are from my friend Christian Wolf. He put together a cool vignette of the 29 Omaha Beach. Here we're just touching up the Belgian gate, just adding some color. Didn't do anything crazy with the rust effects, kept it pretty simple. But here's where the groundwork kind of gets to a spot where I like. So I've darkened pretty much everything, and you can see that area is really starting to pop. It's more of a tan, yellow, ochreish color, but it's gonna look really cool once everything's covered in water. Here I'm sealing it with some matte varnish. It's giving me a little bit better of an idea of what the finished product's gonna look like, and it's kind of a commitment not to go back over it with more paint. Now we're fixing the figures in. This illustration by Michael Ackerman depicts an NCDU sailor. He's got some unique gear, including the paratrooper boots, HBT coveralls, and an M1 carbine with a folding stock. Here you can see some figures I modified. These are dragon figures, and I've used the Tamiya 2-part putty to make HBT uniforms and add the paratrooper boots from other sets. Quick tip on painting faces. I usually start with the eyes. If you can nail those, then the rest comes pretty easy. And this right here is AK Stillwater. This stuff is really good for making sure your base is completely sealed. If any resin were to get through a crack and make contact with the foam, the whole thing could potentially dissolve. It wouldn't be pretty, and it'd make quite the mess. But we're gonna give a couple layers of that, and then I'm gonna seal up the edges in just a moment with some masking tape and apply some more of that still water to the contact point between the tape and the base. This stuff right here is cheap resin I got from a hobby store. I've used the AK resin in the past on that dozer build you saw during the intro, and it worked great. But I didn't feel like ordering some stuff that would take a couple weeks to get here, and this stuff worked just as good and was a lot less expensive. You can see that the resin covered the entire surface. That wasn't the original plan, but we're gonna roll with it. There's a little area by the navy guy in the middle that's not covered, but you know, it ended up working out in the end. Peeling the tape off. Had one little hiccup right here, and had to fix that, but that was no biggie. So this reference image has some engineers from what I believe is probably the 5th Engineering Special Brigade. They were part of the Gap Assault teams, and I think some also landed independently and did some beach operations kind of after D-Day, just clearing out obstacles and making roads and that kind of stuff using their bulldozers. But here we got, I believe it's AK water gel effects, and what that does is it just breaks up the surface of the resin, so it's no longer going to look like a sheet of glass. We're going to have some slight ripples, and then I'm going over a second time and making some more defined ripples. Wouldn't quite call it a wave. Doesn't seem tall enough to be a wave, but essentially just following my reference images. I really wish I know who shot this video. I did a screen recording and I didn't capture their name, so if I find them, I'll put it in the description. But what you're seeing is that footage, it was taken, I believe, right by Dog Green sector, and you can get some crazy surf and a lot of foam on the water, which is what we're gonna do right now. So using water, gel transparent, and snow sprinkles by AK. We're gonna make some foam. I usually do like a 50-50 mixture, but you usually to start, you're gonna want a little bit more of the water gel transparent. You don't want it being too white. I've made that mistake before, but that's why we do test builds. And I think I'll show that in a second if I didn't show it already. There was another kind of test build I did, and I learned a lot about these techniques before I applied it to something final. But I'm using the direction of the white water of the foam to kind of frame the characters and all that. But I took this picture before letting it dry, and I kind of realized I liked the way it looked and didn't really need to add anything else. So blocked in the sides with some black paint and called it good. Overall, I was really happy with how this one turned out. I was able to put in some kind of artistic elements and things like that, such as blue-orange contrast, creating focal points where the figures are, and create an interesting story too. All the figures work together, and they work with the base and with the Belgian gate. So overall, one of the dioramas or vignettes I'm most proud of. All right, that's pretty much it for this one. Had a really good time filming it and learned a lot about kind of what works and what doesn't work in terms of shooting footage. So looking forward to making some more of these. Got some cool ideas up my sleeve. Haven't started any of them yet, but once I get this up on YouTube, I'll be starting some new ones. All right, thanks for watching. Catch you next time. Later.